Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're getting into something many of you might know about in vitro fertilization, or IVF, here in the U.S.
Yeah, it touches a lot of lives, directly or indirectly.
Definitely. So we've pulled together the latest available info, mostly from the CDC and SART. The most complete data set we have is from 2021.
That's right. And our plan today is really to pull out the key stats on IVF and maybe touch on, complementary approaches too.
Exactly. So let's start with the scale. How big is IVF in the U.S. based on that 2021 data?
It's pretty significant. In 2021 alone, we're talking about approximately 97,128 babies born through IVF and other related treatments, what they call ART, assisted reproductive technologies.
Wow, nearly 100,000 babies in 1 year.
Yeah, it's a big number. And what's really striking is that IVF itself makes up over 99% of all those ART procedures.
So RT basically is IVF for the most part.
Pretty much, yeah. The other methods are a very small fraction.
Okay, so nearly 100,000 births. How many attempts or cycles does that represent?
Well, CDC got reports for 413,776 ART cycles started in 2021.
400,000 cycles. Okay.
But that number includes cycles that maybe didn't get to the embryo transfer stage for various reasons.
Ah, right. So it's not quite 400,000 transfers.
Exactly. The data gets a bit more complex there. SART, that's the Society for Assisted Reproductive Technology, their data shows 238,126 patients had cycles that did involve embryo transfers.
Okay, 238,000 patients undergoing transfers.
Right. And based on how cycles progress, estimates suggest the actual number of individual embryo transfers was probably somewhere between, say, 260,000 and 300,000.
Got it. That's still a huge number of procedures.
Absolutely.
So the big question for many people is, what are the chances of success? Like, if a woman under 35 has an embryo transfer, what's the live birth rate?
That's definitely a key metric, and it really varies. Age is a huge factor.
Right.
For women under 35, the live birth rate per embryo transfer is roughly in the 40% to 50% range.
40 to 50%. Okay, that's helpful context.
Yeah, it gives a good benchmark. It's harder to pin down an exact overall number because the reporting doesn't always neatly separate, like fresh versus frozen embryo transfers in every single breakdown.
Understood. So those nuances matter, but that under 35 figure is a useful starting point for listeners.
Definitely.
Given those odds, it makes sense that people might explore other things to potentially improve their chances. This brings us to acupuncture and herbal medicine.
Right. There's certainly discussion and some research around using these alongside IVF.
We've seen it mentioned that these practices have been, and I'm quoting here, scientifically documented to increase pregnancy rates when used with IVF.
Well, there is growing interest, and some studies do suggest potential benefits.
Yeah.
It's an area where research is still ongoing, trying to understand how and how they might help.
So more investigation is happening there.
Correct.
And just as a concrete example of this integration, we came across the Berkeley Center for Reproductive Wellness in New York City. They mentioned being the first complementary reproductive medicine center in the U.S., offering things like acupuncture and customized herbal medicine specifically for fertility.
Right. They position themselves as integrating those approaches.
So if listeners are curious specifically about what they do, their number is 212-685-0985.
Oh.
And the website is www.berkeleycenter.com.
And it's probably good to add, while we mention them as an example tied to our discussion.
Oh, absolutely.
It's not an endorsement. People really need to do their own research and, most importantly, talk with their own doctors.
Definitely. Always consult your healthcare provider. Good point.
Yeah.
Okay, so as we kind of wrap up this deep dive, what are the main takeaways for everyone listening?
I'd say first, just the sheer scale of IVF in the U.S., hundreds of thousands of cycles, nearly 100,000 babies born each year from it now. It's significant. Second, that success rates, those live birth rates, they vary. Age is a really big factor, like that 40-50% rate for under 35s.
Right. Variability is key.
And third, that complementary therapies like acupuncture and herbal medicine are things some people are exploring alongside IVF, and research is looking into that.
Okay. That covers it well.
Yeah.
So maybe a final thought for you listening. Fertility is obviously complex, right? It makes you wonder how different approaches, the established ones and these emerging ones, might fit together for individuals on this journey.
It's a very personal path, for sure. Lots to think about.
Indeed. Thanks for tuning in to The Deep Dive.